And the FBI and other federal agencies have raided his houses. Do you have those tapes?
Again, I can't discuss the specifics of our law enforcement operations related to Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell, but obviously we had very active investigation related to both of them. But whether it extends to other people, I'm not sure that's something
But here,
can comment on.
a suit was filed yesterday.
Senator Kennedy.
Sorry, Martin. Mr. Director, welcome. I bet you just love talking about where to put the FBI building, don't you? Probably one of your favorite topics. I've got two questions. Number one, if you took the major Mexican drug cartels, which also traffic people into the United States, and turned them upside down and shook them, President Lopez Obrador would fall out of their pockets, wouldn't he?
Well, I don't know that I can comment on a specific individual's corruption other than through cases that we bring. But I understand the point that you're making, for sure.
We're not getting much cooperation out of Mexico, are we?
Let me put it this way. While we have had some successes here and there in terms of extraditions and so forth, and I appreciate those, and I'm grateful to our Mexican partners for those, especially at the working level, we need a whole lot more from Mexico than we've gotten in terms of shutting down the cartels and stopping the flow of the precursors. I mean, I could go on and on. So I'm grateful for the successes we have had, but we need a heck of a lot more, is the way I would answer that.
Why don't we use leverage of what I call NAFTA 2 to try to encourage the president of Mexico to cooperate more?
Yeah, I mean, NAFTA, of course, is a trade agreement, and I'm not really an expert on trade relations. Certainly, from an FBI perspective, we welcome every tool in the toolbox to try to improve the relationship and the cooperation, and I'm hopeful that the Mexican government will see the value of building on the successes we have had and take it to the level that it needs to be, because it's not where it needs to be.
Okay. Here's my second question. We know that Jeffrey Epstein, who is now deceased, and Ms. Maxwell, his associate, who's in prison, were engaged in a conspiracy of sex trafficking with minors. So were others. It's been widely reported. What's the FBI doing to investigate the other people that were involved in these sex trafficking rings?
Well, I'm not sure that I can confirm any specific individual.
Well, let me put it this way. Let me give you some facts, widely reported. Jeffrey Epstein had video surveillance in all of his homes and on his private island. And there have been articles after articles from witnesses who have said he videotaped sex acts with prominent people because he was trying to incur, with young girls that he had procured, to try to incur favor with those prominent people and potentially to be able to blackmail them. Now, that's a fact. And the FBI and other federal agencies have raided his houses. Do you have those tapes?
Again, I can't discuss the specifics of our law enforcement operations related to Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell, but obviously we had very active investigation related to both of them. But whether it extends to other people, I'm not sure that's something
But here, a suit was filed yesterday against one of those prominent people by one of the young women sex trafficked, allegedly, said he was part of the ring. It's on the front page, I don't know, is this the New York Times, Wall Street Journal? And we keep seeing article after article after article, and we keep hearing about prominent person after prominent person after prominent person. I just want to know if these prominent people are above the law and are going to be, and aren't being investigated, or is the FBI investigating them?
Well, no one is above the law, number one. As to whether specific people are being investigated, that's not something that I, as I'm sure you can appreciate, can engage on here. We've devoted significant resources to the investigation.
Is it ongoing?
I'm not sure there's anything I can share with you on that, but let me see if we can get back to you and provide a little more information.
Well, for example, these allegations in this lawsuit, the civil action.
Yeah, I haven't seen
You ought to read
the
it.
article.
It'll trigger your gag reflex. Is the FBI going to investigate that?
Well, again, I haven't seen the article, but I would be happy to take a look at it and take it back and see if it's part of something
I'd
we're
just
already
like to
working on.
know,
I share your...
yeah, is the FBI still investigating this, or are these prominent people going to go scot-free?
I'm not sure that I can tell you whether or not there is ongoing work being devoted to this. I would be happy to take a look at the specific article. I share your disgust at Mr. Epstein's conduct and Ms. Maxwell's conduct.
And others.
The whole operation.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry, Martin. Mr. Director, it seems to me that some people should not have power. I don't care how smart they are. I don't care how experienced they are. They just don't have enough maturity or morality or ethics to exercise power. And I am talking, of course, about your predecessor. You have been a significant improvement. Unlike my experience with you, and what I've observed is that unlike your predecessor, you're not egomaniacal, and you're not egocentric, and you're not a self-aggrandizer. You don't run around like your predecessor going, look at me, look at me. You don't leak to the press like the Titanic. And I know that's a low bar, but I appreciate it. You talk a lot about 38,000 women and men in the FBI, the vast majority of whom do an extraordinary job, and I agree with that. Most of those women and men that you're talking about are in your field offices. I'm not saying there aren't some in the Washington office. But the problems we've had with the FBI over the past decade, you've alluded to them, have come primarily out of the Washington office. I listened carefully to your recitation of your efforts to clean that up. But I think most fair-minded Americans still wonder if there has been real accountability in all cases. And that's the spirit in which I'm going to ask you these questions. Who made the decision at the FBI to raid Mar-a-Lago for those documents?
Well, I'm not sure there's a specific person that made the decision. It was the investigative team that was on that investigation, working with the prosecutors on the case.
Why didn't you just do a consent to search and avoid all the drama?
Well,
You, but whoever made the decision.
yeah. Well, let me try it this way, because obviously we are talking now about not just an ongoing investigation, that's not just an ongoing investigation that's being led by a special counsel, but an ongoing investigation being led by special counsel that's in front of a court with likely very strong views about what it is I can say publicly, which gets at some of your your gracious comments about public commentary about cases. But I think if you, in that particular instance, if you look at the affidavit in support of the search warrant, and more importantly, the pleadings that were filed by the prosecutors in the case, they lay out in a very detailed way all the efforts that were made to ensure compliance short of proceeding to a search, as well as now has been charged, actual obstruction of justice. And so, in my experience, again, speaking more generally now, both as a line prosecutor and now as FBI director, when it comes to obtaining classified information, retrieving it, we typically pursue the least intrusive means possible, but if those don't work, and certainly if there's obstruction of justice, which in this case as found by a probable cause standard by the judge, then it's pretty typical to resort to a search warrant.
Of course, as you know as well as I do, that the FBI cannot censor American speech. Talks about abridging speech, that our First Amendment does. At one time, I think it was during your tenure, the FBI had 80 FBI agents working with social media, encouraging social media to take down accounts and remove, quote, disinformation and election interference. A district court found that the FBI and other agencies asked social media platforms to remove content and to change their moderation policies in a way that violated the First Amendment. And it went up to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit limited the injunction, but here's what the Fifth Circuit said. The FBI, quote, likely coerced the platforms into moderating content and encouraged them to do so by effecting changes in their moderation policies, end quote, in violation of the First Amendment. The FBI agreed with the plaintiffs that, quote, I'm quoting the Fifth Circuit, federal agents ran afoul of the First Amendment by coercing and significantly encouraging social media platforms to censor disfavored speech, including by threats of adverse government action, like antitrust enforcement and legal reforms. That's serious. Is the Fifth Circuit wrong?
Well, as you may know, first off, let me just say the opinions talk about a whole bunch of other executive agencies besides the FBI, and I'm not going to speak to what the other agencies did or didn't do. But
well, you weren't the only one. It was the White House. It was Homeland Security. But your folks were there too, all 80 of them, 80 agents.
Well, but
combing social media every day, calling Twitter, calling Facebook, take that down. Get rid of that account. And it wasn't just on election interference. It was on COVID vaccines. It was on lockdowns.
So a couple things, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify this. So first, on things like COVID vaccines and stuff like that, the FBI had no role in telling anybody to take anything down. In fact, as you may know, the FBI was the only agency back at that time, and the only agency in the entire intelligence community to reach the conclusion, to moderate confidence, that the origins of the pandemic were most likely a lab leak in China. We were the only agency, so we most certainly were not encouraging anybody to communicate differently on that. Second, even on the topics we did communicate with social media companies about, from everything I've seen, we in fact did not instruct anybody to take that information down. As to the Fifth Circuit's opinion, as you may also know, we actually hotly contest a lot of the findings, and not just the legal conclusions, but the actual factual findings, and the department has sought Supreme Court review, asked them to vacate the injunction. The Supreme Court's not only vacated the injunction, but granted cert, so I probably should leave it at that.
Let me stop you a second. I've gone way over. I want to ask you one last question. We had a controversy during the election about Mr. Hunter Biden's laptop. And at that time, you had 80 agents interfacing with social media, doing whatever they were doing. The FBI had the Hunter Biden laptop, got it on December 9th, 2019. The New York Post story, which a lot of the social media companies at the suggestion of government took down, the story came out on 10/14/2020. Why didn't the FBI just say, hey, the laptop's real? Why didn't you just tell everybody the laptop's real? We're not vouching for what's on it, but it's real. This isn't a fiction.
Well, as you might imagine, the FBI cannot, especially in a time like that, be talking about an ongoing investigation. Second, I would tell you that at least my understanding is that both the FBI folks involved in the conversations and the Twitter folks involved in the conversations both say that the FBI did not direct Twitter to suppress.
But others were
story.
in government.
Well, I can't speak to others in government. Now, that's part of the point that I was trying to make, because the Fifth Circuit's opinion.
You're the FBI. You're not part of the White House and part of Homeland Security. You're not supposed to be political. You see all this controversy going on. Why didn't the FBI say, time out, folks, we're not getting in the middle of this, but the laptop's real?
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, welcome. As you know, I am deeply concerned about the conduct of both the Department of Justice and the FBI, particularly in the last 3 years during the Biden administration. I think the Department of Justice has been profoundly politicized under Attorney General Merrick Garland, and I think the FBI has as well. And unfortunately, I think you've been unwilling to stand up to senior career officials in the FBI who's allowed the FBI to be politicized. I'll tell you, I regularly speak with FBI agents across the country who are unhappy about the integrity of the institution being weakened because DOJ is being treated as a political weapon. I want to talk in particular about the investigation into multiple allegations of corruption concerning Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, because the Department of Justice has, I think, from the outset, tried at every step to stop investigation into corruption from Joe Biden. As you're aware, a WhatsApp text message was sent to Henry Zhao, a senior Chinese communist, from Hunter Biden that reads as follows: I'm sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand. And now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows, and my ability to hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Now, Democrats and those in the media trying to defend the White House repeatedly say there is no direct evidence of Joe Biden's involvement in his son's corruption. Well, this is a text that is direct evidence, that is stating that it is his father that is going to retaliate. Now, an IRS whistleblower, Gary Shapley, testified before the House of Representatives that the natural step he wanted to follow was to determine whether Joe Biden was in fact sitting next to his father when this threat was made to extort millions of dollars from a Chinese communist. And what the IRS whistleblower testified is that when he tried to find out whether Joe Biden was sitting next to Hunter, that the DOJ blocked getting the GPS data on Joe Biden's phone. Did the FBI try to ascertain where Hunter Biden was and where Joe Biden was when this text was sent?
Well, I think the questions you're asking go to the ongoing investigation being led by Special Counsel Weiss, and so I'm not going to be able to discuss what is or isn't in scope.
So look, there's been testimony under oath from the IRS whistleblower that you did not seek the GPS data. And you're right, David Weiss, the special prosecutor, is in charge of it. And it is David Weiss and his underlings who, according to the IRS whistleblowers, have alleged that they're the ones trying to stop the investigation. They allowed the statute of limitations to run on many of the most serious violations. Not only that, IRS whistleblower Shapley testified that on September 3rd, Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf explicitly told investigators that despite having probable cause to search, quote, there is no way a search warrant would be approved when the evidence in question was located inside of Vice President Biden's guest house. Wolf stated that, quote, the optics prevented such a search. Is the FBI, do they make a routine practice of allowing partisan political optics to prevent investigating serious evidence of corruption?
My instructions to our people on this and on every other investigation are that we are to follow the facts wherever they lead, no matter who likes it, no matter what political influence
Then why
there
did
may
you
be
get
out
the
there.
GPS data on where Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were?
Again, Senator, with respect, I can't discuss
But it's
an
not
ongoing
with respect.
investigation.
And Director Wray, you and I have gone round and round on this because I understand. Anytime you're asked about this, the answer is it's an ongoing investigation. Of course, the investigation isn't ongoing. You're not doing the work. You got whistleblowers pointing out that you're not doing the work, and you are hiding behind the skirts of the Attorney General. Look, the whistleblower also testified that the Attorney General, when he came before Congress, go to the next chart, came before Congress, lied under oath to this committee. The Attorney General testified to this committee in response to my questioning. I have pledged not to interfere with the Hunter Biden investigation, and I have carried through on that pledge. The IRS whistleblowers have alleged the Attorney General lied under oath, a felony. Was the Attorney General telling the truth when he said this? Do we have the chart? We don't have the chart. Was the Attorney General telling the truth when he said, I have pledged not to interfere with the Hunter Biden investigation, and I have carried through on my pledge?
Again, I can't speak to the Attorney General's testimony. I can only tell you what my instructions have been to our people, and I
Has there
expect those
been
to be
political
followed.
interference in the investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden?
Not that I have experienced.
Were the investigators allowed to investigate whether Joe Biden was complicit in the corruption?
Again, there is an ongoing investigation.
I'm asking you about
being led.
corruption from DOJ. Were they allowed to investigate Joe Biden, or is the whistleblower telling the truth that DOJ said Joe Biden's off limits, no questions about the big guy?
And as to what is in scope or not in scope of the ongoing investigation, I would refer you to Special Counsel Weiss. That is not me hiding behind anything, Senator. That is a longstanding policy that has been in place
Director
through
Wray,
multiple administrations,
you have a
going back years and years
have
and
a
years.
responsibility to the FBI, not to allow it to be a partisan tool and a partisan weapon. The testimony, and by the way, the FBI's done nothing.
And I have not, and I will not.
Have you opened an investigation into whether the Attorney General lied under oath to Congress and whether the Attorney General obstructed justice?
I'm not going to go down that road here.
I know you're not. That's the point. Nobody thinks you've opened an investigation because you're not willing to. And the amazing thing is, Director Wray, I've known you 30 years. You're not a partisan Democrat. You're simply sitting blithely by while career partisans in your agency allow it to be weaponized. And you are damaging the FBI, and you are damaging the Department of Justice. Let me ask you also, the whistleblower testified that investigators wanted to execute a search warrant on a storage unit used by Hunter Biden, and instead they tipped off Hunter Biden's lawyer before the search warrant was carried out. Is it typical FBI practice to tip off the subject of a search warrant before the search warrant so they can remove any evidence that's incriminating?
What is typical is that when you're dealing with an individual who has a protective detail, it is typical for agents to be in contact with the subject's protective detail.
Does the protective detail guard the storage unit?
Again, I can't speak to the storage unit specifically. What I can tell you is that when it comes to...
Why would the FBI tip off the subject of a search warrant about the storage unit that was going to be searched beforehand? Does that not undermine the very essence of an investigation that DOJ is purporting to undertake?
Again, I'm not going to be able to discuss specific investigative steps
But
that
who
were
is?
taken
If
in
you're
this.
not, nobody answers these questions, and it's why people are furious with the cover-up, because you don't believe the FBI is accountable to Congress or to the American people.
Your time is up. Director Wray has requested a 5-minute recess. 5 minutes.
Let me just, Senator, if I might just quickly respond and then
Respond.
go to the break. Thank you. I understand why this is frustrating. I do. But it is also the case that these policies that I am referring to about my inability to discuss ongoing investigations, and certainly internal deliberations related to ongoing investigations, are policies that have not only been in place for many, many years through multiple administrations of both parties, but in fact, these were policies that were actually strengthened under the last administration, and that my predecessor was faulted in a fairly scathing Inspector General report for not following. And
When
so I
you
keep
see
that in my
corruption,
mind.
you have an obligation
when
to
I
call it out.
engaged in this job. Thank
You
you.
have an obligation to call out corruption.
Senator Holy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, thank you for being here. I noticed with interest in your written testimony that you said, and I'm quoting you now, the FBI uses all tools available at its disposal to combat domestic terrorism, which now apparently includes the crime of being Catholic. Let's talk a little bit about the FBI's egregious targeting of Catholic Americans. You have repeatedly been asked about the memo generated by the Richmond field office, we now know in collaboration with multiple other field offices, about recruiting sources in Catholic churches. You have repeatedly said that no human sources were approached. This is you on July the 12th in the House. You were asked directly by Jim Jordan, do you think that priests ought to be approached to give information on parishioners? You said, no, sir, no, sir. You went on to say, we do not recruit, open, or operate human sources. We do not report on religious organizations. You went on to say, this product, meaning the Richmond memo, has not resulted in any investigative action. But now we know that, in fact, FBI agents did approach a priest and a choir director to ask them to inform on parishioners. So were you lied to when you gave this testimony, or were you lying to Congress?
Neither. So your question conflates two different things. There's the intelligence product itself, which the Richmond field office created. It was written by, as our inspection found, by analysts in Richmond, reviewed by people in Richmond, and captioned Richmond field office product. Separately from that, there was an investigation of a specific individual who was amassing Molotov cocktails and posting about killing people. And it does not surprise me that there were people who knew that subject in that investigation, that is the guy building the Molotov cocktails and trying to kill people, that people talked to the witnesses who knew that person. And I think the product, the Richmond intelligence product, which cites that investigation, is actually pretty transparent about exactly what I just said.
No, I don't think so at all. In fact, the only reason we know this is a whistleblower has come forward and told the House under oath that the FBI went and interviewed priests and choir directors in the Richmond area. The House goes on to say that the FBI has repeatedly refused to disclose this information. The only reason we know it is because a whistleblower came forward with it. Just like the only reason we know about this memo is because a whistleblower came forward with it. How many other parishes around the country have priests or choir directors been approached? By the way, are Catholic choirs now, are they breeding grounds for domestic terrorism? Is this your latest theory? How many other parishes have FBI agents approached priests and choir directors to ask about parishioners?
Look, Senator, we do not and will not conduct investigations based on anybody's exercise of their constitutionally
You
protected
have done
religion.
so, and your memo explicitly asks for it. Your memo labels traditional Catholics as racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists in need of investigation. You have a list of churches, a list in the memo. You've repeatedly said we don't target churches, we don't list churches. They're listed in the memo. So how many other parishes have you gone to talk to choir directors, for heaven's sake?
As I've
Know the answer to that question.
No, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can tell you that we don't investigate people for their exercise of their constitutionally protected religious expression.
I
That
just can't-
particular intelligence product is something that as soon as I saw it, I was aghast. I had it withdrawn.
Really, you were aghast.
I was.
Oh, really? And
Yes,
what
sir.
have you done about it? Did you fire the people who wrote it?
No, I had it withdrawn.
Have you fired anybody involved in it?
Senator, if you would give me a chance to answer
That's a
your
yes or a
question.
no. It's not hard. Have you fired anyone involved in the writing of that outrageous memo about which, frankly, you've repeatedly misled the public? Yes or no?
The individuals involved
Have
in that
you
product
fired
were
anyone?
just a minute, were not found to have engaged in any intentional or bad faith conduct. And in fact, Senator, a number of the individuals
answer is no.
involved in writing that product in the Richmond office were themselves Catholic. So the notion
Oh, I see.
that
So
they were
therefore
targeting their own faith
Oh, so they
is
have a
nonsense.
get out of jail free card. I see. I
They-
see. So you're
I did
immune
not
and
say
they're
that.
immune. So we shouldn't ask questions about it. You haven't done a darn thing. You haven't fired anybody. In fact, what the House found is, what is it? You admonished them. They were admonished. And their respective supervisors were told to engage with the Human Resources Division to ensure that deficiencies are addressed. Oh, well, I feel much better. They've been sent to bed without food. Good heavens, Director. This is one of the most outrageous targetings. You have mobilized your division, the most powerful law enforcement division in the world, against traditionalist Catholics, whatever the heck that means. And you're just told us you have not fired a single person. I mean, here, it gets worse. Your Richmond field office, they thought there was nothing wrong with this. The House interviewed the head of the Richmond field office. He testified. It's all here in the public report. I refer you to it, pages 12, 13, 14. He testified he saw no problem with this. He said he thought it was fine. In fact, we have internal memoranda of the members of the field office high-fiving. One peer reviewer, another member of the field office wrote, "I think this is a great product. I really enjoyed the read." Do you have a problem with systemic bigotry against Catholics in the FBI?
No.
What are you going to do about this? Are you going to fire these people or not?
Those individuals have all been admonished, and it is all going into their,
Admonished.
if you would let me finish my answer, it is all going into their annual performance reviews, which has direct impact on their compensation, among other things.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. I see. So the 60 million American Catholics who now learn that your FBI has recommended that priests be recruited as informants. Your FBI has gone to priests, choir directors, but we're to feel better because you've admonished them for their wrongdoing.
You again are conflating two different
No, I'm
things.
not.
When
I am
we are-
taking your testimony where you said you do not. You said categorically, you said we do not go to priests and ask them about their parishioners. You said we do not. You didn't say we haven't. You didn't say we won't. You said we don't. It turns out you do, and you kept it from the public. You deliberately misled Congress about it, and the only reason we know about it is because a whistleblower came forward.
I just
That's the truth.
fundamentally disagree with your
Well,
characterization.
there's no characterization. The facts are the facts, and I fundamentally resent the fact that you have violated, if not the spirit, if not the letter, certainly the spirit of the First Amendment, and used your law enforcement agency against Catholics in this nation. Let me ask you about one other thing. Last time you were here, you had to leave early to take a jet to your vacation in the Adirondacks. Now, let me just ask you this. A whistleblower tells us that you also maintain a home in Atlanta to which you fly on a regular basis. I'm told by this whistleblower from the FBI that you use the FBI jet to make that travel. Is that correct?
All of my travel, personal or work-related, is required to be done on FBI planes. That is longstanding policy. It goes back well over a decade.
I'll take that as a yes. The whistleblower also says that you regularly require the jet, which is based in Manassas, to be flown to D.C. because, and I quote now, Wray doesn't like to sit in traffic. Is that accurate?
No, that's not accurate.
He also says that you pay only the lowest cost commercial ticket for that Atlanta to D.C. trip, which is, I don't know, what, $200 or something? When, of course, it costs $20,000, $30,000 to operate the jet. Is that correct?
The reimbursement that I provide is reimbursement that is set by OMB policy, and I follow that policy, which goes back over a decade, and I think has been chronicled in a GSA report from back in like 2013.
You provide all the
these issues.
records to this committee of your travel and relevant use
I'll
of the
provide
FBI
whatever
jet.
information is appropriate, absolutely.
Well, appropriate. I mean, everything that we ask for?